Some families celebrate your victories. Others wait for you to fail so they can feel better about themselves. Mine belonged to the second kind. If you had asked anyone in my hometown about my younger sister, Olivia Carter, they would have smiled and said she was beautiful, charming, and destined for great things. If you had asked about me, Emma Carter, the answer would have been much shorter. Oh, she's still trying to figure things out. That sentence had followed me for years. What no one knew was that I had spent the last decade building a life so different from the one my family imagined that the truth would have sounded unbelievable. I had learned long ago that not every success needed an audience, especially when your own family treated your dreams like a joke. So I stayed quiet. 3 days before Olivia's engagement dinner, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. "Emma," she said without even saying hello, "your sister wants the whole family there Friday night." I almost laughed. For nearly 2 months, no one had called me. No birthday wishes, no invitations, nothing. Yet suddenly I was expected to show up smiling. "I'll think about it," I replied. There was a long pause before she lowered her voice, and "Emma, please don't embarrass us." I frowned. "What does that mean?" "Wear something simple. Don't talk too much. Daniel's family is wealthy and very respectable. I know how to behave, and if they ask what you do," she hesitated. "Just tell them you're between jobs." The words hung in the air. "I'm not between jobs. I know." She interrupted quickly. "But your career is complicated. We don't want to confuse anyone." Complicated. That was her favorite word whenever she talked about my life. When I was 19 and turned down a comfortable office job to chase a dream, she called it complicated. When I rented a tiny apartment instead of moving back home, it was complicated. When I disappeared for years working 18-hour days, it became proof that I had ruined my future. They had stopped asking questions years ago because they had already decided the answers. I looked out the window of my downtown office, watching the city lights sparkle below. "You've already told them I'm unemployed, haven't you?" I asked quietly. "Silence." "Emma, you have. We just didn't want them judging our family." I smiled sadly. So lying about me was easier. "It's only one evening." "No," I whispered. "It's been my whole life." She ended the call without another word. Friday evening arrived faster than I expected. Instead of wearing one of the designer dresses hanging in my closet, I chose a simple navy blue dress and a light gray coat. No expensive jewelry, no luxury handbag, just enough to avoid another lecture about showing off. The restaurant overlooked the city's river, with crystal chandeliers reflecting warm golden light across polished marble floors. When I walked in, every seat at the large table was already occupied. "There she is," my father announced. Not warmly, more like someone acknowledging a late delivery. Olivia looked stunning in her white dress, her engagement ring catching the light every time she moved her hand. She barely glanced at me. "You made it," she said flatly. "I was invited." She shrugged. "Barely." Daniel stood and offered a polite smile. "It's nice to finally meet you, Emma." Before I could answer, my mother stepped in. "This is our older daughter," she said with an awkward laugh. "Emma is still finding herself." Daniel smiled politely. "What field are you in?" Before I opened my mouth, my father answered, "She's unemployed at the moment." A heavy silence settled over the table. Several members of Daniel's family exchanged sympathetic looks. One woman gave me the kind smile people reserve for someone who has just admitted they lost everything. Olivia sighed dramatically. Emma has always had big dreams. The way she emphasized the words made them sound childish. "She starts projects," Olivia continued, "but nothing ever really works out." Laughter rippled softly around the table. My mother added, "We've told her stability matters more than dreams." I wrapped my fingers around my water glass to keep from reacting. Not one word they had spoken was true. Yet correcting them would only create the scene they feared. So I simply smiled. I'm doing just fine. Daniel looked uncomfortable. I'm sure everyone finds their path eventually. My father chuckled. We've been waiting 10 years. More laughter. I had spent years believing comments like those would eventually stop hurting. They never did. Pain simply became quieter. Dinner continued as though I weren't sitting there. The conversation revolved around Olivia's wedding, luxury vacations, investment opportunities, and family connections. Every achievement Olivia mentioned earned applause. Every time I tried to contribute, someone interrupted. Eventually, Daniel's father set down his wine glass. Tomorrow is a very important day for our company, he announced proudly. Everyone looked at him. We're meeting with the founder of Carter Dynamics. If everything goes well, it'll be the biggest partnership in our firm's history. My heartbeat slowed. Carter Dynamics, my company, Olivia smiled excitedly. I've heard their CEO is impossible to meet, Daniel nodded. They say the founder never attends meetings personally. His father grinned. Apparently tomorrow will be an exception. Whoever this CEO is, they're one of the most influential business leaders in the country. Around the table, everyone speculated about the mysterious executive. Someone guessed it was an older billionaire. Another imagined a famous entrepreneur surrounded by security. I quietly lowered my eyes, hiding the smallest hint of a smile. No one noticed at that exact moment my phone vibrated beneath the table. I glanced at the screen. Board meeting confirmed 9:00 a.m. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow, CEO Emma Carter. I locked the screen before anyone could read it. Across the table, my family continued talking about success, respect, and impressive people, completely unaware that the unemployed embarrassment they had mocked only minutes earlier was the very person they were hoping would change their future. And for the first time in years, I realized that tomorrow, the truth wouldn't need me to defend it. It would introduce itself. The drive home from the engagement dinner was strangely peaceful. The city lights blurred past my windshield, but my mind wasn't on the insults I'd heard only an hour earlier. Those words weren't new. My parents had spent years convincing themselves that I would never amount to anything. Hearing them introduce me as the unemployed sister hurt, but it didn't surprise me. What surprised me was how little it affected me now. 10 years earlier, I would have cried the entire way home. Tonight, I simply smiled. When I unlocked the door to my penthouse apartment, my phone immediately rang. The caller, ID read Maya Brooks. Maya wasn't just my executive assistant. She had been my first employee, my closest friend, and the one person who believed in my dream before anyone else did. Please tell me you survived dinner, she said as soon as I answered. I laughed softly, barely. They recognized you. No, they still think you're unemployed. They announced it to the entire table. There was silence, then Maya sighed. I don't know whether to laugh or be angry. You can do both. I've watched you build a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars, Emma. You employ over 3,000 people. You donate millions to education every year. And somehow your family still thinks you can't keep a job. They only see what they choose to see. After ending the call, I walked over to the floor. Ceiling windows overlooking the city. From there, I could see the illuminated headquarters of Carter Dynamics standing proudly against the night sky. Seeing that building always reminded me where everything had started. 10 years ago, I wasn't living in a luxury apartment. I was living in a tiny one-room apartment above an old laundromat. The roof leaked whenever it rained. The heater barely worked during winter. I owned exactly 2 business suits, both bought secondhand. Every morning, I worked at a coffee shop from 5 until 11. In the afternoons, I attended business classes. At night, I taught myself software development through free online courses before working on my startup until sunrise. I rarely slept more than 4 hours. Meanwhile, my parents were paying for Olivia's designer clothes, vacations, and university tuition. When I asked if they could help with 1 semester of college, my father didn't even look up from his newspaper. "We've already invested enough in you. But you paid Olivia's tuition. She's actually going somewhere." Those words stayed with me for years. Instead of giving up, I started building software for small businesses. The first version of my product failed. The second failed even faster. The third attracted exactly 1 customer. I celebrated anyway. 1 customer meant someone believed my work had value. Months later, I pitched my company to investors. The first rejected me in less than 5 minutes. The second laughed. The third told me, "A young woman without connections doesn't build companies like this." I walked out fighting tears. Then came investor number 27. His name was Richard Lawson. Instead of asking about my age or my background, he asked only 1 question. "Can your technology solve real problems?" Yes. "Show me." 3 hours later, he became my first investor. That single meeting changed my life. Over the next decade, Carter Dynamics expanded faster than anyone predicted. Our software was used in hospitals, schools, banks, and international corporations. Business magazines called us one of the fastest growing technology companies in the country. Journalists constantly requested interviews. I declined almost all of them, not because I was hiding from the public. I was protecting my peace. Back at the engagement dinner, my family had spoken as though success could only be measured by appearances. They never bothered asking where I disappeared every day. They never wondered why I occasionally traveled overseas. Whenever I missed holidays because of business meetings, they assumed I was avoiding responsibility. The truth never interested them. Their version of my life was easier to believe. The next morning, sunlight poured through my apartment windows. I dressed differently than I had the night before. Instead of a simple navy dress, I wore a perfectly tailored charcoal business suit. A silver watch rested on my wrist. My hair was neatly tied back. The woman staring back at me in the mirror wasn't the unemployed sister. She was the founder and CEO of one of the nation's most respected technology companies. My driver was already waiting downstairs. As we approached Carter Dynamics headquarters, employees entering the building smiled and waved. "Good morning, MS Carter." "Morning, CEO. Welcome back." I greeted everyone by name whenever I could. Respect was never something I demanded. It was something I tried to earn every single day. Inside the executive lobby, Maya was waiting with a tablet in her hands. "Today's schedule is full," she said with a grin. "Board meeting at 9. Partnership presentation at 10. The investors from Harrison Capital." She nodded. "The entire executive team is coming." I smiled. "I met some of them last night." Maya looked confused. "They have no idea who you are, do they?" "Not yet." The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor. Outside the boardroom, dozens of senior managers stood as I approached. "Good morning, MS Carter." "Morning, everyone." Maya handed me the presentation folder. "They've already arrived." Through the glass wall, I could see Daniel, his father, and the rest of their executives taking their seats around the conference table. Daniel looked confident. His father appeared excited. Neither of them noticed me standing just outside the room. Maya smiled knowingly. "Ready to introduce yourself?" I glanced through the glass one final time. They spent last night feeling sorry for me. I placed my hand on the conference room door. I wonder how they'll feel in the next 60 seconds. Then I pushed the door open. The conversation inside the conference room stopped the instant the doors opened. Every executive around the polished walnut table turned toward the entrance. Daniel sat beside his father, Richard Harrison, reviewing a folder of financial reports. Neither of them looked up immediately. "Good morning, everyone," Meyer announced confidently. "Please welcome the founder and chief executive officer of Carter Dynamics, Ms. Emma Carter." The room fell into complete silence. Daniel looked up first. The color drained from his face. His eyes widened with disbelief as he stared at me, searching for some sign that this was a mistake. It wasn't. Richard Harrison slowly stood from his chair. "You," he whispered. I offered a calm, professional smile. "Good morning, Mr. Harrison. It's nice to see you again." His mouth opened, but no words came out. Across the table, another executive glanced between us in confusion. "You've met before." Richard cleared his throat, briefly. "Last night." Daniel still couldn't believe what he was seeing. "The engagement dinner," he murmured. I nodded politely. "Yes." No one mentioned how I had been introduced. No one repeated the word unemployed. It hung invisibly in the room anyway. I walked confidently to the head of the conference table, placed my tablet on the polished surface, and greeted every member of my executive team. "Thank you all for coming." Within seconds, the giant screen behind me lit up with Carter Dynamics' newest global expansion strategy. The meeting began. For the next hour, I presented our vision with confidence and precision. We discussed international partnerships, artificial intelligence, healthcare technology, cybersecurity, and long-term investment opportunities. Questions came from every direction. I answered each one without hesitation. The executives from Harrison Capital took notes almost nonstop. Daniel barely spoke. Every time he looked at me, I could almost hear last night's conversation replaying inside his head. "She's unemployed. She's still finding herself. She's always chasing impossible dreams." Those sentences had aged badly in less than 24 hours. Halfway through the presentation, Richard Harrison leaned forward. "Ms. Carter, your growth projections are extraordinary. Thank you. I've been in business for 35 years. He smiled respectfully. I've rarely seen leadership this prepared. I appreciated the compliment. Success comes from hiring people smarter than yourself and giving them room to succeed. Several members of my executive team smiled. That had always been my philosophy. When the presentation ended, the room erupted into applause. Contracts were exchanged. Lawyers reviewed final details. Then, one by one, everyone stood to shake my hand. Richard Harrison approached first. "Ms. Carter." His voice carried genuine respect now. "I owe you an apology." I tilted my head slightly. "For what?" "For assuming I understood who you were." I smiled politely. We all make assumptions. His expression suggested he understood the deeper meaning behind those words. Daniel approached next. He looked embarrassed. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." "No." He shook his head. "I should have spoken up last night. I remained silent when your family introduced you." He continued quietly. "I believed them. I know. I'm sorry." I studied his face. Unlike the others, his apology seemed sincere. "I appreciate that." Before he could continue, Maya handed me my phone. "You've received 23 missed calls." I glanced at the screen. Every single one was from my family. My mother, my father, Olivia, even my aunt. News traveled fast. Apparently someone attending the meeting had already posted photographs online. Business reporters waiting outside had captured images of our partnership announcement. Within minutes, financial news websites published headlines. CEO Emma Carter signs historic partnership with Harrison Capital. Young tech founder leads multi-billion-dollar expansion. Carter Dynamics announces record-breaking investment deal. My phone vibrated again. This time, Olivia was calling. I declined it. A second later, my father called. Declined, then my mother. Declined. Maya looked at me carefully. Family, I nodded. They've suddenly remembered my phone number. She smiled knowingly. I had a feeling. By lunchtime, social media was flooded with articles celebrating the deal. Comment sections praised Carter Dynamics for its innovation. Business magazines highlighted my leadership. Television reporters replayed clips from the press conference. Then something unexpected happened. My mother posted an old childhood photo of me and Olivia online. The caption read, "We've always been so proud of our daughters. Congratulations, Emma. Your father and I always knew you were destined for greatness." I stared at the screen for several seconds. Always proud. I remembered every birthday they skipped because Olivia had another competition. Every graduation they barely attended. Every dream they dismissed. My father posted another message. Hard work always pays off. Family is everything. I couldn't help laughing softly. Family had only become everything after success arrived. Maya glanced over. What is it? I showed her the posts. She read them once, then again. Finally she sighed. They're trying to rewrite history. They can rewrite social media. I locked my phone. But they can't rewrite my memories. Later that afternoon, my assistant informed me that my parents were waiting in the reception area downstairs. They hadn't scheduled an appointment. They simply arrived, just like they always had, expecting my life to make room for theirs. I looked through the floor to ceiling windows at the city below. The little girl who had spent years begging for their approval would have rushed downstairs. She would have believed every apology. But that girl no longer existed. The woman standing in her place had spent 10 years building something far more valuable than wealth. She had built self-respect. I turned away from the window. Tell them, I said calmly, that the CEO is unavailable today. And for the first time in my life, I chose my own peace over their approval. For the next 2 weeks, my family refused to give up. Every morning, fresh voicemails appeared on my phone. Emma, please call us. We need to explain. It was all a misunderstanding. My mother even sent flowers to my office with a handwritten note that read, "Family should never stay apart." The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, they had treated me like an outsider, while I desperately tried to belong. Now that the world knew who I was, they suddenly remembered I was family. I thanked the receptionist for the flowers and donated them to a nearby nursing home. One afternoon, Maya stepped into my office carrying a small envelope. They're still here. I looked up from my laptop. Who? Your parents, she sighed. They've been waiting in the lobby for almost 3 hours. I closed my laptop slowly. I suppose it's time. Instead of asking them to come upstairs, I met them in a quiet cafe across the street from Carter Dynamics. When I walked in, both of my parents stood immediately. For a brief second, I barely recognized them. My father, who had always spoken with such confidence, looked nervous. My mother's eyes were red from crying. "Emma," she whispered. I nodded politely. "Please sit." An awkward silence settled over the table. Finally, my father spoke. "We made mistakes. I waited. We shouldn't have introduced you the way we did. The way you did." I asked calmly. "You mean calling me unemployed?" Neither of them answered. "You've been telling people that story for years." My mother reached for my hand. "I thought we were protecting you." I gently pulled my hand back. Protecting me from what? She lowered her eyes. People can be judgmental. I smiled sadly. They certainly can. Another long silence followed. Then my father cleared his throat. "Olivia wants to apologize too." As if on cue, the cafe door opened. Olivia walked inside, still dressed as perfectly as ever, but the confidence that had always surrounded her was gone. She stopped beside our table. "I'm sorry, Emma." I looked at her quietly. "For what?" "For everything. Be specific." She swallowed hard. I was jealous. That answer surprised even our parents. You were jealous, I repeated. She nodded. Ever since we were kids, I frowned. You were the favorite, I know. Then why? She took a deep breath. Because no matter how much attention Mom and Dad gave me, you never quit. I didn't interrupt. You worked harder than anyone I knew. Her voice cracked. Every time something went wrong in your life, you got back up. She looked down at the floor. I hated that. For the first time in years, I believed she was telling the truth. I convinced myself that if everyone believed you were a failure, maybe I could finally feel successful. Our mother quietly wiped away tears. I should have stopped it, she whispered. Instead, I encouraged it. My father lowered his head. I did too. The apology was real. But real apologies don't erase real scars. A week later, Olivia invited the entire family to another dinner. This time, when I entered the restaurant, everyone stood to greet me. My uncle smiled proudly. There she is. My aunt hurried over. We're so proud of you. Several cousins asked for selfies. My mother beamed as she introduced me to distant relatives. This is our oldest daughter, Emma. She smiled proudly. She's the CEO of Carter Dynamics. I looked at her for a moment before speaking. That's interesting. The room became quiet 2 weeks ago. I continued gently. I was introduced as your unemployed daughter. No one spoke. You asked me not to embarrass the family. My mother's eyes filled with tears. I know. You were embarrassed by who you thought I was. I smiled not with anger, but with peace. The truth is, I never needed you to tell people I was successful. I paused. I only wanted you to believe in me before I became successful. Several relatives lowered their eyes. No one could argue with that. After dinner, Daniel approached me outside the restaurant. I've been thinking a lot, he admitted. I judged you based on someone else's words. It happens. I should have gotten to know you myself. I nodded. That's a lesson worth remembering. He smiled. I hope one day you'll forgive me. I already have. He looked relieved. But forgiveness doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. He understood immediately. Before leaving, I stood in front of my family one last time. I won't use my company to give special jobs or business deals to relatives. My father looked disappointed but nodded. That's fair. However, I continued, next month Carter Dynamics will launch a scholarship program. Everyone looked surprised. It will support students whose families cannot or will not believe in their dreams. My mother began crying again, because she knew exactly why I had chosen that cause. As I walked toward my car, the evening air felt lighter than it had in years. For so long, I believed revenge meant making the people who hurt me suffer. I was wrong. The sweetest revenge wasn't becoming richer than the people who underestimated me. It wasn't watching them regret their choices. It wasn't hearing the apologies they should have offered years ago. The sweetest revenge was building a life so full of purpose, dignity, and happiness that their opinions no longer had the power to define me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't leaving as the family's embarrassment. I was leaving as the woman I had always been, someone who never needed their approval to know her own worth.